Hey, I'm going to be teaching you how to play some very familiar chords in a very unfamiliar way. But the way that I'm going to teach you actually makes it a lot easier to take your mind off of your fingers and just focus on the music. These chords are basic to the key of E. Of course, if you use a capo, you can change that, but we're just going to be thinking about chords in E. Let's get started. The first chord that most people learn when they play guitar is E. Really easy, right? So, it takes time. It becomes easy with practice. But at first, this is the first thing you learn. And probably the next one you learn would probably be A. Maybe another one would be like D or G. Okay? This has mostly to do with the key of E. Alright, so we're talking about E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. We're talking about a major scale here. And what we're going to do is, instead of talking about chords as letter names, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, etc., we're going to talk about them like they're numbers, or like they're steps in a scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. We don't call it 8, it's 1, because it's the same as our first note. So now we can start beginning to think about this being not an E, but the 1. You have to be careful. If you're in a song that is mostly about G and to C, this is not a song in the key of E. Okay, the numbers are related to what key you're in. If you're not sure, you can ask someone for help on figuring out the key, but the basic thing to look at is what chord does the song start on? What chord does the verse start on, the chorus start on, or end on, or what chord does the song end on? Usually that's the best place to see. But if you find common chords coming up while you're looking at the form of the song, your best guess is going to be the one that's going to be the one that feels right. I know it's a really subjective thing to say, but really you can tell. If a song is always just going from A to B, or 4 to 5, 4 to 5, ending here will not feel satisfying, because our 5 should resolve to our 1. So this is where the numbers come in handy, okay? Again, this might be new for you, and that's okay. But it is a good idea to start thinking about chords and notes in a scale of the key that you're in as numbers. So let's go back to E. I was talking about this chord specifically as being the first one you learn. Now, if you've studied guitar for a while, you've probably come across bar chords. Bar chords, I believe that's what they're called. Bar chords are when you are literally barring, or you're using your index finger to cover all the strings, and then you're adding basically the same fret distance as E, and you're now just barring. So now I'm keeping the same shape with an E. I'll show it to you here. Now I'll play an F. It's the same intervals. Okay? That's where a lot of punk rock songs come from, is using stuff like this. It has that kind of sound. You can also play it on the next string up, on the A string. But it's not going to be the same shape, and this is where you get into major and minor things that we're not going to really talk about in this video, but it's not the same shape. It's now, you're going to bar like this. So now I have a C. I could play it, of course, the classical way, open chord, or I could play it, I would say this is like pop, or punk, or whatever you want to call it, or rock. But I like to call these things power chords because when I was learning guitar, I figured out, okay, E, sure, G, this is boring. I really want something that sounds like the songs I liked, and were the songs I liked at that time. So I learned how to play power chords pretty quickly. The thing that makes up a power chord is you need to have the root. So I'm going to choose this note, which is E, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. Okay, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Okay, and then I'm going to find the octave above that. The way I find an octave on the guitar is pretty easy, actually. What you do is any note you're starting from, except for from the G string, that's a different one, and the D string. Okay, my bad. So E and A are the same. What you do is put a finger somewhere. I'll put this here on B, and now I'm going to go up 2 strings. Then I'm going to go up 2 more frets. That's the same pitch, just 1 octave or 8 notes higher. There it is. That was 8. Believe me, I'm right. And then all you have to do to make it a power chord is you add the 5th. There's the 5. Excuse me. So now, when you play it together, it sounds kind of like a lot of songs. Okay? It has a fun sound, whatever. I like these a lot. They're just really easy. But something I realized too, from listening to more complicated punk rock, or post-punk, as they were calling it in the mid-90s, the late 90s, or started to listen to a lot of hardcore. I was listening to the bands play, and I noticed that they were doing a lot of different sounding chords. Although the roots were the same as songs that I've heard, they were adding notes that I didn't know how to figure out until I started just trying to listen as best I could, and then started to hear more interesting ways to variate the power chord. Which is what we're going to talk about, and that's the main purpose of this video. I know we started on E, and now I've talked about numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 1, and now we're going to apply that here. So now I'm going to use my, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. I'm not really a guitar player. Secret! The 7th fret up on the 2nd string A is E. Sounds the same, it's just an octave higher. And now I'm going to do that power chord again on E. So I'm going to go up 2 strings and go up 2 frets. There's my octave. Then I'm going to do the 5th, which is right below that octave note. Same sound. It all sounds the same after a while. I get it, sure. So here's what, when I started to listen to more acoustic guitar music, like Dashboard Confessional. It's like an emo guy who did songs with the guitar, but he had really funky tunings, but a lot of it was very open sounding, and he did some tunings that were just standard guitar tunings, and I noticed that for a lot of those songs, there were lots of strings that were ringing out, even though he had chords moving. And I was like, oh, I like how this sounds. And I thought it was really cool how it could keep, you could have strings that just keep resonating while the root, the lowest note, changes. Okay, this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. Okay, so we're going to start simple. The first thing to getting that open sounding, this is really actually, it's good for acoustic guitars too, but this open sounding feel is you want to have, we're talking about E. So you have an E chord. So this is our E. If you see E in music, or depending on the feel, whatever it is. We're just going to make it more mellow, just to make it slow and easy. So we're going to think about notes here. So this is E. It's 1. Okay? The most popular chord tones to use in songs. Sorry, not chord tones, but just chords. We're talking about like the numbers. I'll post a link to a really helpful site too. That is called, not prepared. Not prepared. What is that site called? Hooktheory.com. I had to look at my internet browser to see what was up. So, on hooktheory.com, you can see the probability. They sampled about 2,500 songs to see the most probable chord progressions in music. And out of all the chords that you would probably hear in a song, the most popular ones are 1, we're talking about E, so 1, 4, 5, and 6 minor. So we're going to stick with those today. The convenient thing about this new way to play and to strum is that if you notice from before, to play an A is just a fifth down from E. So there's my 4 and my 5 and my 6 minor. I could actually just do this. There's nothing wrong with it, except that thing you heard right there. You got to be careful about your pinky. Your pinky needs to mute the G string. If it doesn't, it sounds like this. Which sounds a little bit more intense than I think you want it to be, as in not so uplifting. So you really want to mute it. You just have to get used to muting strings with your fingers as well as holding them down. And again, this is nice. There's nothing wrong with this. But it's a lot of movement. The purpose of the open fingerings that we've learned in guitar when you first start learning is that you just get kind of used to moving your fingers and not having to look. And if you're not as skilled at guitar, I don't want to say as I am, because I'm not that skilled, but if it's hard for you to feel how many frets that you've actually skipped, it's easier just to move your fingers. It's easier to have that muscle memory instead of just thinking, I have to move my whole hand. It's easier to think, I'll move one finger. And that's what I'm going to teach you today. Let's go back to our open E. Alright, we have a power chord on E. And then we're letting the E, the B, and the E strings, the high E strings, all ring together. Now instead of me moving my whole hand down, this might be a stretch, and it's okay if it is, but you need to start stretching your fingers. I'm going to play a funky chord. So here's our 1, and here's I'm going to ditch this string completely, okay? That's part 1. So I'll play it like this. I'm going to put 3 on the E and 5 on the B, and the 5 is, your 5th finger is going to mute the G string. It's almost identical in sound. And you just have one more E. Hear it? It's okay if you don't. You will one day. So here's our E. And now I have my index finger here. There's our 4. This is A. It's a lot easier, instead of moving your whole hand, to just put one finger down. And if you want to play a B, just slide it up. Not hard. Again, back to A. You just have to get your 3rd finger ready. This is the one that's going to be a little bit weird. This is our C sharp, or our 6 minor. What we're going to do is we're going to take our 4th finger, our ring finger, and put it on the same fret as our pinky. What this is, I think it's a minor 7. the jazz. I think it's a modified jazz chord. I don't know exactly. But the main part is you need to remember is that this is the C sharp minor, which you'll see a lot in these types of songs. So you're now the next thing you need to do is get used to playing these chords in order or mixing it up and just training your fingers to get used to moving around. And you'll actually probably make some pretty cool music at the same time. You can practice your picking styles. I'm cheating. Okay, I'm cheating here. I said this is a B. It's okay to use a B, but this is really more like an E chord on top and a B in the bass. If you really want to make it a B chord, you'll have to use your index finger and your middle finger on the root note. Okay? I was also doing something before. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe that was an earlier take. I'm going to do it now. Sometimes in songs, you'll want to add something. Sometimes you're holding on to an E for what feels like forever. And there's only so many different ways you can change it till the chord itself gets stale. Okay, so here's two things you can do to make it sound interesting. Okay? Your pinky, the E up here. What I'm going to do is I already have my middle finger primed. My middle finger is the fret below where my pinky is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let off my pinky. And what this is actually a major 7. That is on D sharp. It's a half step below E, or 1 fret below E. Maybe you've heard this before, it sounds familiar. But it's a really simple way to make a chord that you're holding out for a long time, like this when you're making instructional videos. Or when you need to talk to people, or keep the time going, or you're just waiting for the drummer to pick up the right set of sticks, or you're waiting for the singers to stop chewing gum, or whatever it is. This is a good thing to do just to kind of kill time, but at least make it feel like time is still moving, even though it's not. The other way you can go is it requires a bit more movement. But you can also take this E and go up 2 frets to the F sharp. This makes a 9 chord. 9 comes from the amount of steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 1, and then 9. Okay? This has a really nice open sound to it. And you can start to add the 9, the 7, and 1. Just mix it around. You can also mess with the 7 or the D sharp in your index finger too, especially when you have chords like B over D sharp in a song. Probably go to a C sharp. And you see, I've learned to stretch my fingers pretty hardcore here. I'm holding the E power chord with these 3 fingers, and with my index finger, I'm just treating it like it's the bass note all the time. The idea? So after you start getting comfortable with this, then you can start adding this thing with the pinky on different notes, like A. Doesn't always sound great. You have to kind of experiment to see. Like that doesn't sound good. But the 9 probably will. You can start getting into some really interesting chords. Sounds really pretty. Does it stretch your fingers? Yeah. Does it make you a better guitar player? Yeah. Is it worth it? I think so. So, again, this is one way to just make your life as a guitar player in a band easier. Instead of doing this all the time, now you can move your hand up, and now you can let your bass note be the only one that moves. Have fun practicing.